On Friday, I saw an online news article about a Korean gymnast losing a gold medal. That's what it said. He lost the gold medal. 한국말로 뭐였는지 금메달을 빼앗겼다 그랬나 뭐 놓쳤다 그랬나 뭐. Because he failed to bow to the judges. I was like, what? He didn't bow, and it sounded like, well, it could just be me, but it sounded like the gold medal was taken away from him because he didn't bow. And I was outraged, right? How could they take away the medal for not bowing? However, it turns out that he was given just 0.3 penalty for not bowing. 0.3. And that reduced his average to 14.550. And he was in the lead until the last guy. And this guy was from Hong Kong. And he earned the average of 14.612. What was the average point of the Korean guy? 이렇게 빨리 잊어주셔서 감사해요. 14.550. 14.550. And this guy was 14.612. So by less than 0.1 point. Less than 0.1. Kim Han-sol took silver instead of gold. Now, what was more shocking for me from the story was that he didn't know that there was such a rule. That he could get penalized for not bowing to the judges. 한국 애들은 너무 인사를 잘하니까 저 가르칠 필요도 없는 거죠. So he didn't even know that there was a rule. Compared to his flawless performance, bowing was nothing. 얼마나 쉬워요. 나도 하는. But this cost him his gold medal. We see something similar with the story of Adam and Eve at the Garden of Eden. It was such a small thing, just eating fruit. Well, it was a forbidden fruit, but she just ate a fruit. And after eating it, we lost it all. The whole humanity was dragged under Satan's rule, and we became enslaved. So we need to remind ourselves every time we get tempted by Satan that there are consequences to sin. Sin will cost us dearly. It is very expensive. And there is really no way of knowing the full weight of the cost of sin until we actually bear the full weight of it in utter destruction. Someone wrote about the birds he saw at the Niagara Falls. It was in March, but it was still a very cold day. And as always, there were white clouds of water droplets rising from the falls, and it was all foggy and white. And he was standing on the edge of the falls. He was watching with other people. And he saw birds swooping down. I don't know if they were just catching a drink or catching a fish. Or they'll swoop down and then go up and turn around and then come back and do that again and continue to do that. And as the birds kept going down and going up, and small droplets of ice will form on their feathers until the points where they were not able to take off from the water anymore. So they're desperately flapping their wings, but they're unable to fly. So the birds will drop over the falls with the water into a sudden death. Like these little droplets of ice on the wings of these expert flying birds, the cost of sin will weigh us down. The cost of sin will bring us down to death. And we cannot emphasize this enough. We can't even exaggerate the effect of sin. And so God told Eve, if you eat of this tree, you will surely die. I mean, there was nothing worse than that. I mean, there was not a greater threat that God could give to Eve. But she still didn't get it. David was the perfect candidate, chosen by God to be the king of Israel. He was well prepared. He went through so much hardship in his life, and he was raised up as the perfect leader for Israel. But one day, when everything was calm and everything was going great, he was walking on his roof and spotted a beautiful woman taking a bath. And you know how the story went down from there. He thought he was just having one fling, just for one night. But she got pregnant. And Uriah refused to go home. David had to kill Uriah. And the gates of hell flung open to him. So until the day he died, David had to pay the wages of his sin. One of his sons raped one of his daughters. His sons started killing each other. His son rebelled against him and kicked him out and pursued him to kill him. And he took David's concubine in broad daylight. So the kingdom was divided. There was a civil war going on. And so many people died. And David's family went through so much pain because of that little one fling. If David knew, even vaguely, what that little fling with Bathsheba would cost him, he would not have gone near the roof. 그냥 다 막아버렸을지도 몰라요. I'm not going to go up there ever again. He would have gone far, far away from Jerusalem into the battlefield until the war was over. If Eve would have known the enormous cost of her eating that forbidden fruit, she would have cut the tree down with her bare hands and would have torn up every serpent she could find in the garden. 저는 그럴 것 같아요. 지금 제 마음에, if I were to go back to that time, somehow, I'll go around and kill all the serpents that I could find. And I'll cut down that tree. So Satan, when he tempts us, would hide the little details about the actual cost of our sin in fine print. If you ever go to United States, I'm sure it is something like that even here too. When you sign a contract, you need to read the contract, especially the fine print. 그게 중요한 거예요, 그 뒤에. Lie to us in the worst way possible to keep our mind off of the consequences and costs of sin and only think of the instant gratification of sin right now. In Tennessee, a young couple came to a neighbor's home and asked if the lady could swim in the swimming pool. I guess this lady had a good figure or was pretty or something. Right? The homeowner said, "Fine, come on in." The first mistake. Once in the swimming pool, the wife sent his husband back home, "Honey, go get my cigarettes." So the husband left. And when there were just two of them there, she asked if she could take off her bathing suit. And he said, "Fine." Mistake number 2. And he stayed there. Mistake number 3. 왜 거기 있어? 왜 들여오라고 그러고? 왜? And he enjoyed the show for 20 minutes. And while he enjoyed the show, the husband, instead of going back to his home, he went inside the house and went around everywhere in the house and stole all the valuables he could find. And he left. And the sad story is, I was shocked to find this out, the owner of the house was a Christian. That is exactly what Satan does when he tempts us. It's not the temptation that's important. It's what he's trying to do with that. 그 여자가 거기서 수영을 하고 그게 중요한 게 아닌 거예요. They have some other agenda. Satan has some other agenda. It's not about you smoking or drinking or cheating or whatever. It's something else. There is something else that he wants to rob from you. The temptation, whatever it is just a distraction. He will completely distract us so we cannot think straight. We cannot focus. Our cars become foggy and unclear. We can't read the contract. It's like too fine. But we sign the contract. And when the time comes to pay, we're flabbergasted. When did I sign this? Wages of sin is death. It's destruction. It's the worst thing that you could imagine and more. According to the gospel stories, Jesus was tempted as well. And ironically, Satan used the same tactic he used with Adam and Eve. He told Jesus, what was the first temptation? What was the first temptation? 뭐 하라고 그랬어요? 먹으라고 또 먹으라는 거예요. Eating. The temptation, eating. How bad can it get? Eating. He tempted Jesus to turn the rock into bread and eat it. It seems very harmless. But when our enemy tempts us with something so insignificant, we need to remember that there probably is something very substantial behind it. 딴 게 있다라는 거예요. 딴 걸 뺏어갈 게 있다. When Eve was tempted, it was not just about eating. It was motivated by her desire to be like God and take his place. Tempting Jesus, Satan said, if you are the Son of God, do this. If you are the Son of God. I mean, he knows. But he's tempting Jesus. If you are the Son of God, turn this rock into bread and eat it. Show me. Show off your godly power. Prove that you are who you say you are. Prove that you are the Son of God. Use that power, use your power to satisfy yourself. That was the temptation. It was never just about eating bread. And thank God, Jesus knew the hidden cost of sin. Can you imagine the consequence of Jesus sinning here, failing here, and making one piece of bread and eating it, a Satan's prompting? Can you imagine what would happen? Can you grasp the cost of Jesus' sin? 우리 다 어쩔 뻔했어요. Wow. I mean, it's such a simple thing. Just turn it into bread. And with that, all of our lives, all of our eternal lives could have gone down the drain. The real price tag is always hidden from the plain sight. But sin is very, very costly. The only way to pay for it ourselves is with our eternal damnation. And what God tried to show the Israelite people with all the required animal sacrifices for sin is exactly that. If you read the Leviticus and books like Deuteronomy, right? It's just animal sacrifices after animal sacrifices. Why all these sacrifices? God wanted to teach them that sin will cost them. That sin was not free. Just because you don't get caught, just because nothing happens now, doesn't mean that it will just go away. There always is a price to pay. So stay away from sin. That is what God is trying to teach the Israelite people. And what's really interesting is that when God calls us, we cannot really understand the full breadth of God's reward either. When God called Abraham, God didn't even tell him where he was going. God simply told him to leave. He wasn't telling him to go somewhere, but he would just leave there, leave. And I'll tell you where to go, leave. God didn't tell him when the first son was coming. He simply told Abraham that his descendants will be innumerable like the stars of the sky. And Abraham believed. That's the key word. Abraham believed. The only way we can avoid the astronomical cost of sin, and the only way to receive the innumerable blessing and reward from God is by faith. By faith. Because we cannot figure it out. We cannot understand it. Only by faith. God's true reward, His true blessing is hidden. We cannot know it. Even God tells us, even when God tells us, we cannot know it. It is not something that we can see and recognize. The Bible says, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has conceived what God has prepared for those who love Him. That is why Jesus gave the metaphor that the kingdom of heaven is like the treasure hidden in the field. It is a treasure hidden in the field. You cannot see it. That is why Paul calls Jesus God's mystery. Jacob thought Esau had everything. Esau had the birthright. He was the firstborn. He had the looks. 막 털도 막. And Esau had the strength. Esau had the talent. God gave everything to Esau and left nothing for Jacob. It was so unfair. So it seemed to Jacob. But it was totally the opposite. God felt sorry for Esau that he gave all the leftovers to him. Right? Jacob had no idea that God has such a wonderful plan to bless him and his descendants above all the families on the earth. His family, no, he was chosen among all the inhabitants of the earth. He had no idea that God chose him to continue the covenant that God made with Abraham. He could not fathom that God chose him over his brother Esau. He had no idea that the Savior of the world, the Son of God, would come from his lineage. He had no idea that thousands of years later, a Korean pastor would be shouting about how blessed he really was. We must believe. You cannot be convinced. It is not something that we can understand. The only way to receive it is by faith. When God says, I know the plans I have for you, and I want to make you great, and I will do amazing things through you. Our response is to believe it or not believe it. There is nothing in between. You believe it, and it is yours. If you do not believe it, you're rejecting it. You're rejecting God's plan for your life, and you're rejecting God. The only way is to believe. We cannot understand. No matter how much God explains it to us, no matter how slowly and simply God tries to explain his plans to us, we just simply cannot understand. We cannot fathom the depth, the width, nor the height of his wisdom. We must believe God's promise. We must believe his word. We must believe it. No eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has ever conceived what God has prepared for those who love him. Do you believe? I remember at the beginning of this year, I shared about this young pianist. She was top of her class. 서울예배인가요? She was top of the class, and everyone expected her, as it was for years. If they're top of the class in that school, they will go to Seoul National University. But for some reason, she didn't even get in. 수석으로 들어갈 줄 알았는데 들어가지도 못하고. She was not even accepted. So the family was devastated. She was devastated. Her mother was devastated. What's happening? But God had another plan. And there was this. She used to be 김혜선 아세요? 모르세요? She was like the youngest professor in Seoul National University. I don't know. But she didn't like the Korean school style, so she left and she went back to the States, and she found out about this girl, and like she was the only one that she was teaching when she was in Korea, so the professor had asked her to come to her school. So she went over there. And after 1 year or 2 years, the professor was invited to the New England Conservatory of Music, I think it's conservatory. It's one of the oldest schools, conservatory schools in the States. It is very well known, one of the best schools for music, and she was going there as the professor, and she wanted to take her with her. And this family was like confused. You know, what are we supposed to do? Should we move to another school? And I when I heard that story, I was like, oh my goodness, this is such a great opportunity. Go! It was amazing school. And I could see that God was leading her, not according to what her parents had planned for her, but God took her to a whole different direction. And a couple of days ago, she left for that school. 지금은 너무 좋아요. They're so excited. They're so thankful. Whatever happens in your life, you may not be the best pianist or whatever, but God has great things in store for each and every one of us. Amen. Because just like we sang today, we are heirs. Or was it the choirs? 그 choir에 나왔던 건가요? Heirs of the kingdom or something. Heirs of something. Heirs meaning that we are supposed to inherit something from God, which means that God has something ready for us when He called us through Jesus Christ. And being God's child, it is an amazing blessing. This blessing cannot be compared to anything else. Even if you go to one of the best schools and maybe God has led you, maybe God has blessed your family with good brains, I don't know. But that cannot even compare to being a God's child. And you will receive an inheritance from God. Something is ready. It has your name on it. Something from God, something that belongs to God will become yours. 별로 안 좋으신가요? 뭘 물려받는다라는 거예요. 하나님으로부터 물려받는. 그냥 뭐 이렇게 조금 주시는 게 아니라 물려받는 거예요. 물려받는. Let us believe. Let us believe God's promises for us. Let us believe the promises in the Bible. Let us believe what God is doing for us. And let us entrust our lives to Him so that we can walk the path of faith. And as we live by faith, that we'll be able to glorify God and receive everything that God has planned for us. Let us pray.